Hello, my name is Mateusz Tomalkiewicz. I am Erasmus student from Nicolaus Copernicus University in the city Toruń in Poland. I'm studying at Pablo di Olavide. My lecture is called Sociology. The subject is run by Dr. Maria José de Pino Espejo. I will present Marianne Weber from her book Authority and Autonomy in Marriage. Marianne Weber, born August 2, 1870, died March 12, 1954, was a German woman rights activist, sociologist, legal historian, wife of Max Weber, and author of his biography. She was one of the first women to study at the university as a free student. She attempted to introduce the female perspective to sociology by writing about the autonomy of women and the institution of marriage. In 1924, she received a honorary doctorate from the University of Heidelberg. She worked for women's rights. She was the first member of the Belgian Parliament in 1920 and later president of the Federation of German Women Organizations. In 1925, she co-founded with Mary Jona Baum, Gertrude Bammer and Alice Salomon the Institute for Women Participation in Professional and Social Activities in Berlin. Whoever wants to fundamentally understand and correctly judge the inner structure of marriage, the relation between the sexes, must at least cast a short glance at the history of its development, above all at the leading idea through which it has been defined. As far as can be determined, at the beginning of our history, the woman was the property of the man among of all civilized people of Europe. Through purchase or exchanges, he gained unlimited right of ownership over her and her children. For this reason, he could freely dispose of her person, example, at any time sell her, expel her, or take up with her competitors, while she remained with respect to him, completely without rights, permanently bound and obligated to loyalty and obedience. As such, initially, the only formal shaping principle regarding the relation between man and woman is simply the right of the stronger, primitive patriarchy. It still exists today among diverse uncivilized people as an unquestioned legal form. The community between man and woman can only be characterized as marriage in an actual sense when the absolute power of the man finds its limit through certain obligation toward the woman. Universally, this occurs first when the woman family cases to turn her over unconditionally to the power of the man. Above all, not without equipping her with the dowry, which elevates the woman as wife to a position above concubines. Her family thus earns for her to initially according to which her children must be considered the man legitimates her over all of his other children. In this way, the oldest conscious structuring of sexual relations was created everywhere out of the natural relation of power. The so-called legitimate marriage is an insurance of certain women and their children against the polygamous drive of the husband. Otherwise, initially, marriage completely maintained the character of relation of ownership. From that time on, every great cultural age has formed and built on this original structure and everywhere, namely, in the same fundamental direction. Wherever civilization grew, the aspiration grew as well to somehow protect the woman from the barbaric abhorrence of the husband. On the other hand, everywhere his domination over her and the children nevertheless remained secure. The husband was the direct towards human patriarchy, towards a middle domination of the wife, but not toward the recognition of her as a companion. The creation of monogamous marriage as an institute of law was the work of the Greek and Romans. This means that they created legal monogamous marriage, which did of course forbid the husband from taking several wives into the home and only allowed him to gain legitimate children from one wife. However, it hindered him neither legally nor morally from passing as many other women as he liked outside the home without any obligation. Also at the time, the commandant of marital fidelity was imposed under threat of severe punishment only on the woman. She alone was the one who had to answer for the realization of a social and ethical idea, which antiquely already revered and recognized, but yet without making the attempt to force the sexually neither nature of the man under its sway. In contrast to the Greeks and Romans, Old Judaism still permitted polygamy, only in surrounded marriage for the first time with religious consideration of nothing less than world historical significance. Marriage was revealed to the prophets of the then world historical significance. Covenant as God, oldest institution and order. God himself had accordingly blessed the first couple, but God himself had also determined the relations of the partners. He created for the husband a helper and imposed on her the word, "You shall be subordinate to your husband, and he shall be your master." This not only was marriage, terribly more made holy, but marriage in a special form. The sanction of patriarchalism had further recencies. It has determined the structure of Christian marriage up until our times, for the lofty Christian teachings of religions, equality of the woman, were already distorted by the greatest apostle when it came to her relation of her spouse. The bearer of Christian propaganda, Paul, who sought in other area of life to break out of Jewish tradition, remained entirely within its limits regarding the woman. Referring to the authority of the law, he sealed not only the woman's obligation of obedience, but also her total position with respect to the man as a being of second order. For the man is not from the woman, but the woman from the man. And the man is not created for the good of the woman, but rather the woman is created for the good of the man. The position has been refined into dogma up until the present in all of those cycles that believe in definitive relations, but has asserted its power beyond the cycles as well. But the another direction, Christianity created a large new cultural product, the depending of the demand of legalized monogamy into the indispensable religious culture imperative that now was only toward the woman, but rather for the first time in the history empathically towards the man as well. Through the fulfillment, as this deal has yet only been realized by a small part of humanity, the mere fact that this was set as a goal to be strived for had to influence the relations between man and woman more definitively. Only then, when the man was also directed toward unification with one woman, could marriage become the vessel for all of his spiritual strength. Only then was the soil made fertile and which out of the natural element of fleeting sexual love, the most tender and deepest spiritual relations between man and woman could grow, in relation of which it could be not nonsense to demand that it be everlasting. However, the complaints of the Christian marital idea would soon suffer losses through the teaching of the Church, as reacting against the sexual access of the cultural world of late antiquity. Those teaching exaggerated the idea of controlling one's sex life, to the point of dispassing all that is natural, and called for its furthest suppression possible. The natural foundation of the community between man and woman was, from then on, banished to the domain of sin. It was still permissible in marriage, but even there it was only worthy of one holy consideration. Life without marriage was considered the more complete state of affairs. Eve, the type of earthly woman oriented towards the flesh, the mother of sin, the tendency to evil was juxtaposed to a Virgin Mary as an obedient and undefiled motherlines. Patriarchalism detried marriage as a work of God about celibacy and the work of humans, but it also allowed sexual love only under the blemishing of evil desire, which originates not from God but from the devil. In the case of such desire, God merely looks through the fingers in marriage because, as Luther says, there is an compensant by many kinds of listlessness and torment. New arguments in the Bible were sought for the subordination of the woman. Thus, Luther cites Eve far from grace very emphatically as its historical source. If Eve hadn't sinned, she would have reigned together with Adam and ruled as his helper. But now Iran belongs to him alone, and she must bow before him as before her master. But, the only hand, the spirit of Protestantism also contribute to the deepening of the marital idea and the shaping of everyday marital life, namely through those currents outside of the official churches of the Reformation that they are classified as Puritan. Of course, Puritanism made a bitter that is not easily recognizable. It, namely, carried into the world and into the institution of marriage with unexplorable strictness and ascetic ideas of monarchy, rejection of all life pleasures, and suppression of sensuality. Luther's God had still, just like the Catholic God, a magnanimous generosity turned a blind eye toward marital sensuality. The God of the Puritans allowed marital sensuality only for the purpose of the procreation of children for the greater glory of God. However, much like we like, today we sharply reject the demonization and relativization of elementary vitality. And one should not forget that precisely that Puritan breeding, which for long periods of time attained and never before achieved disciplination of the man, should be created with a deepening of the spiritual and ethical relations between man and woman that since then has never been lost. Only then, when subjugation of the elementary was taken seriously, could the focus become the spiritual melting together of the partners, the intimacy of their spiritual relations as the most important meaning of marriage. That which marriage was capable of becoming in this cycle was expressed in the religious colored language of the time, most beautifully and in a farewell letter written by the Quire W. Pen to his wife as he departed his homeland in order to found a new state on the other side of the ocean. Don't forget that you were the love of my youth and the chief joy of my life, the most beloved and worthiest of my earthly solace. The reason for the love existed more in your inner than in your wide riches. For the latter are many. God knows, you know it, and I too can say it, that our connection was a work of providence, and God-likeness in each of us was that which attracted us to one another the most. What kind of the word lies between this understanding of relation between the sexes and that which reveals itself in a Greek thinker well-known remark. We have hetera, we amuse ourselves with, after that purchase has to care of our bodies, and finally wives who should give us legal children, and whose duty it is to watch over of the matter of our house. Within the religions, communities of the world that were governed by the Puritan spirit, the view of religion's equality of the woman was taken seriously for the first time. For the Quakers, the teachers in the Bible did not represent the definitive and only possible relations, but rather one of many forms in which the inner light appears to human rights. They could, for the reason, drop the dogma considering the subordination of the woman as God desire, obey God more than human beings. This sentence, which established freedom of conscience on the part of the individual and an inevitable right against every earthly authority, was recognized among these communities for the first time, also in the case of the wife, with respect to the husband. Freedom of conscience, the mother of all civil rights of the individual, stood across the ocean at the handle of women's rights as well. Fundamental subjugation under traditional and trusted authorities, fundamental subjugation only under one's own conscience. From then on, there are two forms of human action that arise equality of our religious feelings, and between which there is only an either-or. The 18th century directed at worldly things the idea that every human being, precisely because he is a human being, is entitled to consent and natural rights via vis or other, and every earthly authority, against the state in the form of demand for political participation, legal equality for its citizens, against the social community in the form of a moral demand on the part of the individual for a certain sphere of inner and outer freedom. These ideas achieve their deepest significance and their highest clarity in the ethical teaching of freedom of German idealism through our great thinker Kant and Fichte. That which is the context of interest may be formulated in a few sentences. The human being as a bar for reason indeed to govern himself, that is, not act for example, according to the aptness for its instincts, but rather in accordance with a conscience that has been subordinated to the moral law. As a bearer of this capacity for autonomy, the individual possesses its specific dignity, which distinguishes its personality before all other beings. It may, for that reason, raise the claim to be an end on itself. Out of this ideas arise that simple and undeniable principle for the shaping of human relationships. Every person should respect in every other human being the predestination of every person to be an end of himself. No person should consider his fellow human beings morally as it means for his personal ends. There is in reality hardly a human relations thinkable that, if its desire to be ethically adequate, can get around the maxim, and the path from the acceptance of the sentence to a new structuring of the relation between the sexes seemed to be a short one, for according to it, the highest ethical goal of existence for the woman as well can be nothing other than a development into a morally enemy's personality. Accordingly, it's just immoral for her to bend to a foreign will against her own conscience. Accordingly, she too may not be used as mere means to the husband ends, but again, alone In the case of the woman, there is ideally were disordered. The tradition that concerned to the man natural constant for the power remains powerful with regard to her. Even the great herald of autonomy did not think about relying on other hand on the patriarchal system. Instead, they tried through a clever chess move for a reason to bring her fundamental subordination into agreement with the new ideas. Husband and wife are declared to be originally equals, and marriage a construct through which the wife voluntarily subordinates herself to the husband. In Kant's view, it is not, for example, contrary to the equality of the spouses of the law says of the husband with reference to the wife, and he should be your master. And Fichte dialectics was even able to infer out of his teaching on freedom a patriarchal marital ideal, which did, of course, include a complete right to divorce on the part of the woman. But that which was done by the woman in the realm of the idea was forced upon her, and the realm of relativeness. The new life forces of the machine age blew open the cycle of her family duties, led her away from the protection of the house, and thereby out of the husband's sphere of domination. The increasing reduction of household work under the pressure of technical and economic forces compels of household work under the pressure of technical and economic forces permanently stand on their own feet outside the home. But the intellectual ring that had closed around her due to the restriction of her activities and influences to the house was only thereby blown open. Today she sees herself woman into a world of superpersonal context that demands that she improve herself in new ways. She sees herself placed before an array of new forms of influence and life problems, between which no one other than she can relationally choose. The intellectual departure from the house, just like the economic departure, must fundamentally shift her position within our social community and her relations with the other sex. We are, indeed, experiencing also in our time, like in no time before, a thorough adjustment of the customs and views regarding the woman, and an expansion of the opportunities for life and developing that are concerned to her. In many areas of life, she has achieved the legal status speaking for herself, and other areas she is still denied in that status. And above all, for marriage, in which man and woman are most closely and directly connected to one another, the legally protected predominance of the husband is still an indispensable from principle. We find, of course, a growing number of men, above all from the leading intellectual strata, that are ready to value their own wife as a personality and to do without to use a gender privilege with regarding to her. However, only very few today agree to the fundamental renunciation to the rights of the authority with regards to the entire female sex. And unmistakable document the fact is the legal form of modern marriage, which the German representativeness or the people bestowed upon us just in time from the turn of century. It's true the German civil code fundamentally recognizes women juridical competency and makes them, just like men, fully responsible in business and transactions. But the housewife's competency is limited, however, it could threaten the husband's dominance in the household. Thus, our marital law is strongly garnished construct which bears all the staleness of a compromise between irreconcilable principles. For example, the robust, garnished obedience article that is familiar to all older statutory regimes and discussed in politically appearing husband decision-making authority, which nevertheless individually hides its unaltered fundamentally character. For the decision-making authority is valid not only in the husband's special sphere of duties, but rather in all those matters that concern the family collective lives. Also, in the housewife and mother's special sphere of duties. Furthermore, marital law today indeed provides for parental authority rather than the paternal authority of earlier times, but the mother parental authority attains its full scope of application only after the father's death, or when he is hindered from exercising that authority. Next to the father, the mother parental authority is only a fragment. She can neither represent the children incurred in illegal transactions nor manage and administer their property. Minor children need only the father consents to enter into marriage, and above all, the wife is again expressly subordinate to the husband within the most important sphere of parental duty. The welfare of the children person which is vested in the mother as well as the father, and their care and rearing, which includes a determination of their living arrangements. In the case of differences of opinions, the father decides. That is, he can determine for the boys and girls which school they attend, which vacation they take up, and where they should be reared. In addition to this personal subordination, this legislative regime also provides for the wife pecuniary independence. This has perhaps less fundamental significance, but in everyday marital life, it's of all the more practical importance. Of course, the new economic conditions of life in which our age has placed the woman have also raised an important innovation from German legal thinking. The wife's independent earning from work remain at her disposal and her savings, while in earlier times she had to hand them over to her husband. The working woman has thus become up to the certain point economically independent. This is not the case, however, for the woman with her own property assets insofar as she does not protect herself before marriage through a special marital contract. For the legal regime places of all of the assets that she brings into the marriage in the hands of her husband. This is done explicitly in order to secure, as the comments to the German Civil Code acknowledge the husband's position as master of the household and head of the marriage. And above all, there is a mass of women who are not secure, including these who are without property and who have to do without independent earnings for the good of their career and housewives and mothers. Still today, the women, even if one only view in economically, make irreparable contributions to the family through their domestic work and perhaps also through their assistance in their husband careers. To be sure, of all these women have an illegal claim to support by their husbands. This is approximate to their social standing. But this very elastic formulation provides them with not a penny for their free disposal and secure for them not even a modest independence for the satisfaction of their personal needs. For both the woman with property and the woman without, it is a pleasure and distraction of the husband, however she will be able to freely dispose of some amount of money. The modern woman, who strictly for personality rise, in the deepest sense for their sex, responsibility and self-reliance, protest against those carryovers from the patriarchal system, precisely because the woman, by force of her familial functions through marriage, is normally much more strongly bound than the husband in every sense, physically and economically. The lawmakers should first and foremost make her protection a priority. For the reason, they reject both the principle of the authority of the husband with the idea of companionship of the partner as a firm principle in marriage and propose elimination of the husband's general legal decision-making authority, a different contribution of parental rights such that in the event of unsolvable differences of opinion, that husband decides for the sons and the wife decides for the daughters, and the work to achieve for the woman of all strata a sphere of pecuniary independence secured through a more exact definition of the support obligation of the husband. Thanks for your hearing and your time.